Today we want to discuss the topic, the resumption of face-to-face school, and we want to have a candid discussion on the issue. You would have seen around the country via the media and even the normal man in the street, lots of comments are being made about schooling in the midst of the pandemic. And therefore, we want to have a candid discussion on this matter so that persons, the general populace, will be apprised with information that has been proven, information that has been tested. And so we do that just to negate some of the spurious views that persons may have been portraying in the society. And so this program basically intends to educate, intends to change the mindset of persons who may have information that may not be very credible. And so in the studio with me today is Dr. Onika Scott, and we also have Miss Lalita Kushel, who is the head of the Department of Mathematics at Aurora Secondary School. And so we have, and of course I am Marcel Hutson, Chief Education Officer. So we have persons who are very competent, who could speak definitively to this matter. I could remember when we opened school the first time, we did not reopen school in a willy-nilly fashion. I was mandated and I pulled the team together and we actually prepared a document that spoke to how everyone should operate in this process. This document spoke to how education officers should operate. We're talking about district education officers, assistant chiefs, deputy chiefs, everyone, how they should operate. For example, the regional education officer had a responsibility for ensuring that packages were distributed, care packages were distributed to our teachers, our students. We had in those packages contained things like hand sanitizers, face masks, vitamins, the tonic, vitamin, and other vitamins and so on. And so it was really a comprehensive, holistic kind of view in this matter. Then we had the school heads. The document spoke to the heads of schools or principals or school leaders, whichever you choose, how they should operate in terms of supervision, in terms of ensuring that markings are placed in the school so the students are socially distanced and periodically ensuring that our students wash hands or sanitize their hands, use of the toilet facilities and so on. And teachers, of course, they had their part to play because they are the foot soldiers. They were closer to the students than anybody else. And so they too had a significant role to play. It spoke about how they should conduct their classes, how they should conduct their lessons. They should have students at all times with their face masks and periodically sanitize their hands and so on. And then, of course, parents. The document spoke to parents. So it's that the part that spoke to parents specifically addressed dropping students off, picking them up, types of transportation modes or transportation modes that may be used and so on. And so even the parents, the document spoke, and of course the students, what they should have in their bags and even in relation to their food or whatever, because we also ensure that the canteens were not to be operational at that time because that was the time when it was most critical. And so canteen services were suspended. And if you were operating a canteen, you had to produce all the information that would make you credible and legitimate going forward. And transportation, like I said, even the security guard had a role to play. No one could get past the gate unless they had on the face mask, unless they were tested with the temperature. The temperature gun was used, and so if these protocols that were established, I have a whole list. The whole document is here. I can't go through this now. We don't have the time. But if we were to adhere to these things, we would have minimized the kinds of problems that we see now in our school system. But you are a teacher from a role. You may want to tell us maybe what your school would have done in the light of this pandemic to ensure that there was safety and security. Because I want to say, to be brutally frank about this, it would be unconscionable for any educator, any officer, to put people and their children in an environment that is not safe. Something is wrong with that model. And so for us to do that, it would not have been a nice thing. And that is why this document was prepared with the view and the hope that people will respond in a positive way so that we could have schooling with the greatest degree of safety. But Lolita, you may tell us, you could probably tell us what transpired in yours.
Yes, well, not only for my school, but I know I can speak for most of the schools, at least the secondary schools in Region 2. Yes, all those things that you said, from the guards, the education officers, the teachers, the students, the head teachers, all of them, they were adhering to those guidelines that they were given. The guards, they ensured that if students, they were not wearing their masks, they had to get one on before they get in. Or they also ensured that they stopped at the gate, because I think it's the regional administration who did the placement of sinks and so on in the compound close to the gate. So they had to make sure that they wash their hands before they get in. In the school now, we as the teachers, we had to place markings in the building, fix the furniture with the prescribed guideline that we were given. And these students, we had to teach them, you need to stick to your points. And things went smoothly. I think also I can talk about, the packages that you mentioned that were sent down by the ministry. They were filtered down to us, at least to our school, our students. They benefited. The students, they used the medications that they were giving, the vital. I think there's not only that, I think it was 3 different sets of supplements they were given. So they used them. And the masks, they were wearing them all day. The sanitizers, they were there. Students were given theirs. At the school level, we also had the department, they sent them. So we had at the school level for them to, use whenever they didn't have. And as teachers, when we go to the class, we go with our sanitizers too. We wear our masks. We maintain our distance. But we were getting through. And I must say, as a teacher, I was really happy to have my students out. I really, really was happy to have them out, because, and I'm not the only teacher. I know almost all the teachers at my school, because at Aurora Secondary, for example, we have children coming from the lakes, the creeks, and so on. And those areas, internet, it's a problem. I know they would have implemented hotspots at I think one at each of these places. But take for example Mashabo. The children, they have to walk quite a distance to get to the center, and we have so many different subjects in the secondary school.
But we will get to that.
Okay,
In the
okay.
discussion, we're dealing specifically
With a package,
okay. We'll come to
Yes.
that. But we have not done anything outside of what the Ministry
No.
of Health or System Ministry would have advocated,
think so.
because we are not the health persons, and we will not pretend that we are
Yes.
experts
No,
in
we're not.
terms of health and how we should conduct ourselves in the school system and so on. And so every move that we made pivoted on what the Ministry of Health would have advocated by way of their own statements, documentation, and so on. And so one of the things that we did after there was a call for vaccination at the central ministry, we led from the front by going and having ourselves vaccinated and so on. So I think all of us here, we are
Yes.
fully vaccinated. But
Yeah.
Dr. Scott, you may want to jump in here and tell us.
Thank you, Doc. I can attest to 2 things. One, we are in the face of something that's new to everybody. And second, given the fact that it was new, we recognize that collaboratively was the only way to move forward. And that's what the Ministry of Education did. The collaborative effort from other sister ministries like health played an important role in determining whether or not schools were safe to return to. And I want to emphasize safe here because instead of saying close schools, with a broad brush approach, we need to think safer schools. They are, and I don't need to mention that there are many serious, dire, long-term effects of keeping school closed without any valid reason. One of the first things we need to admit, be it health or education or any other social ministries that are impacting on this decision, is that there is no clear answer. There is constant reassessment. We have to admit that there are lots of unknowns, and where human beings have a poor understanding or a lot that's not known, there's always fear. Our job is to mitigate that fear, to ensure that there is something called, in medicine, we refer to a term rationing of care. Essentially, if you have one ventilator and you have 3 patients that need it, you need to make that decision. And in rationing of care, we need to take the lesser of 2 evils. And what is the lesser of 2 evils? In my opinion, as long as our schools are safe, we need to rely heavily on the science and the data. And what's the data telling us in Guyana? It's telling us that there are not predominantly infections that are transmitted in the school attending age group to adults, meaning that just about 8.5% of all of our infections in the last year, about 43,000 plus, were children between the ages of 1 and 17 years old. What drove the majority of infections? Which age group? 25 to 29, followed by those 20 to 24 years old. And so we have to base our decisions on the science. The science tells us that there are, again, dire long-term effects of keeping children away from school. And it comes full circle. It comes in another 2-3 years, time lost from the inability to socialize and build that human being is not going to be regained. It comes with social anxiety and depression in adolescenthood when there are prolonged period of isolation. Now we have to think about the practicality of the situation. Not all our children have access to remote learning. And what happens then? What happens when our crime rate goes up later on? That's not to say that we're mitigating the risk at hand. We are not. We're not saying that there's no risk, but we're saying that if we look at rationing of care, the risk of reopening schools is far less than the risk of not reopening schools.
Speaking to that, Dr. Scott, I want to read something to support exactly what you were saying, and this is taken from UNICEF. All right, hear what UNICEF said. We are facing an education crisis for nearly 77 million children. The pandemic has taken away their classroom for the past 18 months. School children worldwide have lost 1.8 trillion hours and counting of in-person learning due to COVID-19 lockdowns. Yet they're saying in too many classrooms remain closed while social gatherings continue to take place in restaurants, in salons, in gyms. People are still going to gym, they're still going to restaurant, they're still dining, they're still going to the cinema. You have people at the cinema and so on. So lots of activities, but somehow there's a picking on the school. And so just to support what you say, other things could happen. Is this a conspiracy against these children? I don't know. But, I don't think the people who advocate, let us say we close the school for the next 14 days. And then nothing happens, another 14 days. We close school for the rest of our lives. But hear what they went on to say. This generation of children and youth cannot afford any more disruptions to their education, which is why we are calling on governments to reopen schools as soon as possible and get education back on track. Just what you were saying, they're saying the repercussion for every child their family, their community, and their economy will be felt for years to come. Many children will never catch up. And I don't think some people understand. Some students have been able to access remote learning. That's what you were saying. Some students have been able to access remote learning, but a lot of students have not been able. What
Yes.
about the people in the vulnerable communities? What about the people in the hinterland where there's
Yes.
we're now trying to ensure that there's network and so on. And so I really don't think that people understand is that for many children, the alternative to school is now will become child labor, teenage pregnancy. Look, the other day we had look what we've seen sometimes in some of the schools. Some people are venting certain feelings in certain ways because the lockdown they're affected emotionally too, and so they're saying that it is impossible as a result of these conditions. Boys and girls, it might be very difficult for them to return to school. So you were saying about the whole thing about education and so
Yes.
on. People don't understand. If there's an issue in education, it takes a little while before that issue manifests itself and comes to the surface. I am taught from educators and sociologists and some philosophers that whenever there's a fundamental problem in education, it takes at least about 5 to 6 years for you
Yes.
to start seeing change. And so I don't believe persons understand what it is said that between the ages of what? Grades 1 to 3, some educators say you learn to read.
Yes.
And after 3, you read to learn. What about the majority, that lot of children who have not been able to be engaged so that they could even read, understand concepts, and advance to go on to higher learning and so on? So I don't think people see, they can't see the impact of this. Dr. Scott, I don't know.
If I may add to that, I have a nephew who, he never went he was supposed to start the nursery at the beginning of this pandemic. And he was never able to go to that school. And then, he had to join primary school. And when he was in the primary school now, they had their own curriculum that they had to follow. So all these things that he was supposed to learn there, let's say letter sounds and so on.
Foundation.
Yes, he missed those things. So he was, really, really struggling, to keep up with the pace of work that he's supposed to do. So that was lost. And it's very difficult to fit it in. And then they have to do what they have to do, what is expected of them. It's not an easy thing. I mean, on the part of the children.
Right.
I think our main focus
Mhm.
should be these children.
Not just concentrating on the children, but then there's some who may be devil's advocates and they ask, well, what about the teachers? Are you
Yes.
not putting the teachers
Yes.
at risk? Are you not putting the older person at home at risk when that child brings something home? And what we do in public health is look at the data. The data is telling us that no, there is not a high index of transmission. Children are not usually the culprit. The data is pointing us to the group that's more at risk. The data is also telling us that there's more long-term negative effects if we isolate our children, we keep them at home. There are geo and social political factors here at play, and all of them, unfortunately, are adversely affected. And that's what we need to pay attention to. We
Yeah.
always look at the data.
That's right.
Right? And we have the data. It's preliminary, but we do have world stats to look at as well. We have that there are, unfortunately, some communities that have not been thriving. Guyana is not the only country that has shown that there's difficulty with remote access in terms of learning. And again, the theme to repeat here is that the Ministry of Education, its collaborative sister ministries, and the government of Guyana has not taken it's a brick approach. It is not a brick approach. It's an approach that is continuously assessed based on our situation.
Right.
We saw the need to close schools, you close schools. Are schools safe now? Of course, it will have its challenges, but predominantly, yes, they're safe.
The World Health Organization says, despite all the things that we've mentioned, that persons would have been exposed not in the school system. I mean, the World Health Organization supports that view, and it says here that schools have not been a main driver of COVID-19 transmissions in communities. This is what the World Health Organization, WHO, is saying, that schools have not been the main driver.
Yeah.
In other words, what the World Health Organization is suggesting here, Dr. Scott, is what you were saying, that this thing may very well be finding itself into the school by other means and other persons, and not necessarily the children. And so we have to be cognizant of this. And so the World Health Organization also recommends that it is only in extreme cases that school closure should be considered, and then only as temporary measures of last resort. So what is important is that we cannot put our teachers at risk either. And this is very important. It would be remiss of us to expose our teachers, because they are fundamental to the process. So we want them to be healthy. We want them to be healthy also. But it is important to note that when we did the statistic by way of the inspectorate unit, we found that over 1% of our teachers, 1%, somewhere about 1% of our teachers were infected, and less than, and somewhere around 0.5% of students. Now, if you do the mathematics, you're talking about 99% of persons as against almost 99.5% of students. So do we lock them away as a result of the 1% and the half of a percent or something, rather than to ensure that we treat with the 1%, we treat with those who are infected and make sure that they get back on their feet so they could go back and perform, and ensure that the process goes on? Because like you said, we have to capture some of them. And if we fail to capture some of them, when I hope, I don't know how to put this, but I don't think some people know what is coming as a result of this posture. I don't think they know what is coming in a couple of years' time. I don't want to call the different professions that we might see people operating in professions that we do not like,
Yes,
right?
sir.
But I don't think people see what is coming. That is why we are suggesting to the populace, let us ensure that we do what is necessary to protect ourselves, to protect our children, to protect our teachers in particular, because like I said, they are fundamental. We love our teachers. I don't know, there seems to be a misconception that we don't love our teachers. I was a classroom teacher for many years, and I know what it is like. Teaching is hard work. And that's why some people describe it as a calling, because if it is not a calling, you'll be vexed every day you wake up knowing that you got to go and work hard. So the stats, like you were saying, Doc, the stats, they're
And
here.
in loving our teachers, Doc, we also need to remember that they are interventive mechanisms that have proven quite effective. And we're looking at our vaccines. Our
Yeah.
vaccines have been working. We in Guyana have been targeting the teachers and, of course, the elderly population. We proudly report as of the 10th of January that we are at 80.9% coverage of first dose, followed by more than half of our target at 56.7% of the second dose, and that's good. So some argue, oh, we cannot open schools unless children get regular PCR tests or they get a regular rapid COVID-19 test altogether, but testing is just part of the package. In managing the pandemic, it is not an interventive mechanism. Vaccines are, because vaccines have been shown and proven to reduce both the mortality and the morbidity from COVID-19. And those are terms that we need to hug and embrace, because when we make our decisions based on science, are we ready yet for in-person learning, for face-to-face learning? Then we look at what we have done, how far we've come in the third year of the pandemic, what are our gains, and what are our interventive mechanisms that have proven very useful and progressively positive. And vaccines have been proven useful. And so the question is, the adult population that's opposing school reopening need to ask, are you civilly and socially responsible to have gotten your vaccine and to get boosted? Are you playing your part in protecting your child and protecting the rest of the population? And those are hard and fast questions that we need to steer right back and have them answered. And if they're answered affirmatively, yes, then we need to remember what we have been saying, governments of the world over have been saying at the beginning of the pandemic, is that we're literally all in this together, and we each have a role to play in how we mitigate and we minimize the risk to ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's very important. You know, we had, I think the Ministry of Education would have done well, and that's not because I'm CEO, but you know, this whole thing about people are under pressure, they cave in. Some people roll over and die, and so we were very, we were very energetic and lively in terms of a process to help our children, even in this pandemic. We saw and I'm sure other programs you'll hear, we produced worksheets, met the children who were in the hinterland communities, those who had no access. Right now we're the learning channel. We have 5 more learning channels. I think it's 6 now, learning channels, and those channels are able to, persons in different communities are able to access learning. We had booster programs. We wrote in the midst of all of this. Our children did well at the CSEC and National Grade 6 assessment in the context of what was happening. They did fairly well. And so I think the whole thing is collaboration. I don't think right now we need to engage in fights and name calling. A chain is as strong as its weakest link. As we engage in fights and name calling, you know who will suffer eventually? Those children will suffer as we take on one another as adults. Some of us, we're already, you know, we have a lot of age, and we have seen good things and good times in our time. And so I think it is important now for us to ensure that those who are coming through, they are able to access what they need to fulfill potential and live purpose-driven lives. And so I don't think now is the time for us to engage in battles, unnecessary battles, but now is the time to collaborate, to cooperate, to come together in the interests of all our stakeholders, our teachers, the common man in the street, the students. Everybody should be empowered at this time.
Yes.
Miss?
Yes, I quite agree. I quite agree that, you know, if we work together, we need, not if we work together, we need to work together on this. You know, as you were saying, you know, many persons, they're not looking at the long-term effect of closing school. They're just looking at, you know, now, you know, the pandemic is here, close school now, you know. They're not looking at, you know, 5, 6, 7, 10 years from now, what is going to happen, you know? So
Yeah.
I think I agree with you. I really do.
Right. So I think the discussion we've started is a very spirited discussion, and I'm sure we could only get better as we continue to advance in this area. We have some critical stakeholders that we need to be by our side. For example, the Guyana Teachers Union. They are critical stakeholders, and so we have had good sessions in the past in terms of relationships and so on. And I think that we need to ensure that they're on board and that we work together. Parents should not allow themselves to be swayed by comments that are not driven with data. And that is why I think Dr. Scott mentioned, and myself, what is happening in terms of data. But, you know, when I look at children, you know, when I see children not fulfilling potential purpose, sometimes tears come to my eyes, because I remember as a little boy growing up in East Rhineville, and everybody knows East Rhineville. East Rhineville was not a place noted for excellent activities, you know, and so, but coming out of there in the school, East La Penitence Primary School, it was, in those days, it was a government school, we had teachers who paid attention to me, this little boy out of poverty and so on. said, come boy, you have to become something in life. And pointed to the areas where we used to have the fights and the acid throwing and the chopping, cutlass, all those things I see. One man even died on me because he was stabbed several. I didn't know what was happening. But the teacher played the role in what I've become today because they paid the interest in me. And so all we're asking for from our teachers is to just have a keen eye on our children and to fight for them. Be their liberators. And believe me, in many contexts, it is only the teachers, like the only little God that those children are exposed to who want to see them do well. And I say this, I don't say this in any derogatory manner, but there are some teachers who show more interest than children than their parents. And that's a fact.
Yes.
And jumping off of the role of the teacher and the social role of the parent, we want to ask the question, well, what do you do if you notice a child is sick? And it's simple. There are protocols out there, national protocols. We do not want to ignore that child. We do not want to say it's just a common cold. We want to observe that child. We want to make sure that after we have put the measures in place, that the child is well and taken care of at home. We use our supplements, we treat the symptoms. If there's fever, then we administer something for the fever, like an antipyretic. We're using paracetamol, we're using Tylenol. If there's a runny nose, we treat the congestion, etc. And then, of course, our social responsibility is to make sure that we get that child tested, so that later on we can pick up the measures to prevent other people in the household and in the classroom from getting ill. And so we need to ensure that both parents and teachers are cognizant of what the next step is. Again, reiterating that nothing is etched in stone. Things will change. As we learn more about the disease, we'll reassess our protocols and reassess our national decisions as well. But what's important is that as human beings, as parents, as teachers, we take care of those children. And we understand that children too can get COVID-19, though to a smaller degree.
Thank you. Any final thoughts? Lolita?
Not so much final thoughts, but I would just like to add to your call of these stakeholders or these vital bodies collaborating, because this is something new. It's not something known, as Dr. Scott would have said. So we just we need to put our heads, our minds together so we can fight this. As you said, only through collaboration we're going to get through this.
Thank you very much. So there you have it. As Lolita said, I want to finish on her note that what we need to move in a direction where there is cooperation, there is collaboration, and we do that in the best interest of all concerned. Our teachers, our students, our parents, the general populace. And so we are going to continue to advocate for schools to function in a manner in which there is safety and our children are able to learn effectively. And so until we meet again, we want to say goodbye from the set at this time. Thank you.